What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kelly, and today's video is going to be a little bit different than my normal content. I want to make this video to tell you guys about how I'm able to travel, make money, take 6 months off at a time to through hike trails, and just be able to live the lifestyle that I live. I get a lot of questions about that, and today I'm going to talk about how I am able to make money as a traveling healthcare professional and how you can as well if you are also a healthcare professional. I myself am a registered dietitian. I have been a RD for 2 years now. I passed my exam and graduated my master's and internship in 2020, September of 2020. I worked about 4 months at a hospital, and then I got my first opportunity to travel, and the rest is history. I also have my notes here, so if you guys see me looking down, there's a lot of stuff I want to cover today. I want to make sure I get all of it, so that's what I'm looking at. Yeah, notes. In this day and age, there are more travel jobs than ever. When I first got into dietetics in 2020 and was looking for jobs, there really wasn't many options out there. However, after COVID, the whole medical landscape has changed. Medical professionals are leaving their full-time jobs in hordes, and that has opened up a lot of opportunities for all healthcare professionals to travel, have flexibility with their schedule, decide when and where they want to work, and also to negotiate higher pay. For me, travel contracts have allowed me to travel to different parts of the country that I never thought I would be able to go and still make money while doing it. I've been able to see all sorts of different things, and it just gives me freedom. I don't feel like I'm in the rat race. I feel like I'm in control of my life. I'm in control of my schedule, and I don't feel bogged down and tied to anything job-wise or anywhere. Travel contracts for me have also been great because I can choose how many months out of the year that I actually want to work. Right now, I'm working about 6 months as a travel registered dietitian, and the other 6 months I devote to content creation and my YouTube channel. So thank you to everybody who supports me on here. You're the reason that I'm able to do what I do. But even if I didn't have YouTube, if you budget your money correctly, then a lot of times you can choose to take months off at a time if you are in a financial situation that allows you to do that. And not having many possessions or bills monthly has allowed me to be more free, have work-life balance, and not be tied down to a job or a place or the rat race of making enough to cover the material items. I've been traveling for 2 years now. I've worked with 3 different travel agencies, and I've worked contracts in California, Arkansas, Florida, and I've also done online/remote work as well. Number one question that healthcare clinicians ask me off the bat is, how does this travel thing work? How do you even get started doing this? So your first step is to find the jobs, and this can be done through a quick Google search. Just Google travel blank. Great places to start will be travel agencies. They'll have different jobs posted. You can put in the search function what healthcare profession that you work, and then it will populate with different jobs. So some of the companies that I've worked for are Aya Healthcare, Dietitians on Demand, which of course is a more dietitian specific website, and Focus Staff, but there's lots of other travel agencies out there. My advice to you would be do a ton of research, talk to other travel clinicians that you may know in your area. Another thing I found really helpful at the beginning of searching for travel jobs was to join Facebook groups. There's a Facebook group for everything these days. So go check out those Facebook groups. Sometimes people will post jobs in there, or you can message somebody and just network with other travelers. And I did a lot of that at the beginning of my travel journey, and it's actually how I got my first travel contract. I just searched travel dietitian in Instagram, and I found Lauren. Lauren, if you're watching, I love you. And she was doing travel dietetics and had been for a while. One day I just followed her, shot her a message, told her, hey, I'm an intern, I'm looking at travel jobs. If you have any insight on that, let me know. Later on down the road, she posted a story on her Instagram saying that they needed another dietitian in California for a COVID relief hospital. I called her that night. She told me about the job. I applied, and I think 4 weeks later, I was in California working my first travel contract. So social media is a powerful thing. I actually just found another contract online the other day on Facebook in one of the travel groups that I'm a part of. So it's really good to utilize those social networks for travel jobs as well. Once you find a job that you like, then of course you will apply. A lot of them will start with you emailing your resume to a recruiter, and then you'll get set up with a recruiter and kind of just go from there. The great thing about travel is I have not filled out a job application in 2 years because the travel agency takes care of that for you. So once you make your profile in, let's say Aya Healthcare, for example, you'll put your resume in there, you'll put your cover letter in there, you'll update it ever so often, and you'll put all of your other information that a job may need. And then you just keep in contact with your recruiter, tell them what you're interested in, and they will help you to find work. Once you find a job that you're interested in, the recruiter does all the work of submitting your paperwork. They'll just ask you to update XYZ. Once that's done, they'll submit it to the job, and sometimes the job will come back and ask you for an interview. But I've actually not had any interviews for 2 years as well. I've just gotten hired on the spot. The recruiter will kind of do that legwork for you and kind of do an initial interview for you on your behalf. And so my piece of advice there is, if you find a good recruiter with a travel agency, stick with them. I got my people and they're great, and they help me get jobs fast and efficiently. And really, once you get your first contract with a company, it's just streamlined after that, because you'll finish that contract and then they already have all of your information. All you'll have to do is go in, update your resume, and then a lot of times 2 or 3 weeks before your contract ends, your recruiter will reach out and say, hey, what are you thinking for these next couple months? Are you wanting to work, or what are you looking at? And you can already have a job lined up as soon as that contract ends. So it can be very streamlined. You can work 12 months out of the year. I know for me, I tend to take months off because I've got my little side business, but you can definitely work 12 months out of the year as a traveler and go a variety of different places. Okay, so scenario, you find a job you like, you've reached out to your recruiter, you've submitted all of your paperwork, the recruiter submits that paperwork to the client, and the client comes back and says, okay, yeah, let's do this. Now you're in the negotiation phase. And this is a very important phase of the process, because this is where you're going to negotiate your rates, your stipends, your start and end dates, your days off, all of that. And this is a good time to also ask any questions. Travel is a lucrative business right now. My number one piece of advice going into this is know your worth. You'll be very surprised what clients will pay, because if they need a dietitian, if they need a respiratory tech, if they need a nurse, they have to shell out to staff their hospital or their clinic. So know your worth. Do your research on the area. Find out how much it is to live around there. What's the cost of living like? What are dietitians or healthcare professionals in your area getting paid? Don't be afraid to ask for a good chunk of money. The worst thing they can say is no, and they'll negotiate a number that's probably higher than what you had wished for in the first place. Especially dietitians, because dietitians do tend to be underpaid. This is also the time when you can ask about days off. Typically, I'll do 1 or 2 longer weekends within a 3-month contract, just so that I can have some time to travel and stuff. But sometimes I won't ask for any days off, just depending. If I'm in a super cool area, you might want 1 weekend off for friends and family to come visit you, or you plan a really cool trip. And you can negotiate those days in advance, and a lot of times the company will still pay per diem or stipend for those days off if you negotiate them at the beginning of your contract. And then, of course, negotiate the starting and the end date of your contract. Okay, so stipends. This is the beauty of travel. And I'll talk more about stipends in a little bit, but this is something that you'll want to ask questions about with your travel agency. How much is this travel stipend for housing? Am I getting a food stipend? Are they paying for mileage for travel on my car? These are things that you'll want to negotiate off the bat and have a pretty good idea. The cool thing about travel stipends is if you have a permanent tax home address, then these stipends are tax-free. And so this is where you can make the bulk majority of your money, because if you're getting $100 to $150 a day, 7 days a week for your living stipend, and you do good research and find a cheaper place to live, then you're making the excess of that cash and it's going straight in your pocket untaxed. I will talk about the permanent tax home stuff in a little bit, so stay tuned for that. All right, food stipend. This is going to depend on what company or agency that you go through. I've gotten food stipends before and they've been really great. This is basically where they pay you each day, 7 days a week for food. And that's always great when you can get a food stipend. What about travel reimbursement? Again, this is going to vary from whatever agency that you go through. In the past, I've gotten up to $1,500 travel reimbursement, and they'll do mileage. So whenever I leave my house to move to whatever location, I drove from Arkansas to California and I got mileage reimbursement there up to like $1,500. So that was really great. This could also cover flight tickets, rental cars, whatever way that you decide to travel. Other questions I like to ask in this phase are, what is the dress code? Sometimes dietitians can wear business casual or scrubs. Always hope for the scrubs. Other things that I ask about that are dietitian specific but could also be relevant in your profession are, what are your clinical duties? What are your order writing privileges? What kind of EHR are they using? As a dietitian, I always ask about the formulary. Are we with Abbott? Are we with Nestle? What kind of TPN do they have? Do I write the TPN order or does pharmacy? All right, the next thing that I'll talk about is things to expect when you sign on with a travel contract. Number one, things happen fast. So you may apply for a job and not hear anything back for 3 weeks. And then one day they'll call you up and be like, hey, can you be here in 2 weeks? And now you got to find housing, you got to figure out how to get there and make sure that you have all your ducks in a row back home so that you can ship off and move somewhere for 3 months or 6 months at a time, whatever contract you negotiated. That was tough. My first travel contract, I found out and they wanted me to be there like 2 weeks later. And I was still working my full-time job at the hospital. I actually had to quit my job at lunch that day right after that phone call, and I wasn't even able to give my 2 weeks, unfortunately. It's not the ideal situation, and I hated to do that because I really liked that job. However, I was about to make more money in 3 months at my travel job than I would have made if I stayed at that job for an entire year. You always have to do what's best for yourself, but you also don't want to burn any bridges. And so I made sure that I was there for like a week and a half to tie up loose ends. But at the end of the day, maybe let your employer know if you are starting to look, or kind of give them a heads up, because again, things happen very fast. And on that note, if you apply for a travel job and you put in and you submit everything, I would start looking for housing then and there and starting to do research on the area. That way, when they call you and be like, hey, be here in 2 weeks, you're not scrambling to find a place. You kind of have already an idea of what the housing looks like and what you need to do as far as housing or renting a car or booking a flight, and you kind of have a leg up on all of those different things. So that segues us into another big question I get. What about housing? What do you do about housing? Sometimes your company will offer to find housing for you, and then you don't have to worry about it and they'll put you up somewhere. However, that will affect your stipend pay. If you let your company find housing for you, you may not be getting a housing stipend because they're taking care of all that for you. Or you can opt to find your own housing and they'll provide you a housing stipend. Depending on what company that you go through, there'll be different terms and conditions, and this is stuff that you would ask about in your negotiation phase. So for me, I've found great housing on Furnish Finder. So if you've never heard of Furnish Finder, it's kind of like Airbnb, but they brand it for travel nursing, but obviously it could be for any travel healthcare professional. It's a little different than Airbnb because you don't do the transaction through the website like you would on Airbnb. It's more of a landing site for all the housing that's available in the market of people renting, and they'll just basically put you in contact with the landlord, and then you will do all the negotiation and transaction privately. So there is a little bit of a risk involved. I've never had a problem with Furnish Finder. The place I'm in right now I found on Furnish Finder, and my landlord has been amazing. This is my second Furnish Finder house. I've had great success. Other places to look are Airbnb, VRBO, Craigslist if you have no worries in your life. As a solo female traveler, I normally do the Craigslist because it could be a little bit sketchy. You know, if you don't care, then Craigslist could have stuff. Airbnb and VRBO do tend to be a little bit more expensive, but they are vetted, and you know that you're not going to get scammed or ripped off because you're going through their website. Airbnb can be a little bit more expensive, but you can also find really good deals if you rent months at a time. There'll oftentimes be like a monthly discount for renting places a month, because normally what Airbnb will do is present as this is your nightly rate. But you can go into your Airbnb and click month-long stays, and it'll show you huge discounts to where it's a lot more affordable to do it that way. Sometimes housing can be very tough to find. So that's one thing that you want to look at before you go all in on a contract, is make sure that there's housing. That's normally one of the first things that I look for when I find a job, to see what the housing market is looking like. A little while ago, I found a job in New Mexico that looked really cool, but there was no housing, and it was out in the middle of the desert, and it was gonna be just really, really hard to find good housing or, you know, make money at that contract because of the housing situation. Definitely take that into consideration before you sign a contract. One of my big tips for housing and travel is don't sign a contract for housing longer than 1 month at a time. And I'm going to tell you why. My first contract in California was at a COVID relief hospital, and initially I'd signed for 6 weeks to do this contract. Well, the contract got extended, I accepted, and we were supposed to be there for 3 months. About midway through the second month, they decided that they were going to shut down the COVID relief hospital because they weren't getting as many patients as we thought we were going to get. And so they were going to send everybody home and terminate the contract early. And that's one thing you have to remember with these contracts, is in the fine print, they do have the right to do that. Now, this also is going to depend on the contract that you sign, but for that instance, they had the right to end that contract whenever, and then we were just cut. Everybody at that hospital was a traveler, so everybody was in the same boat. Well, I had already paid for my Airbnb through the end of that 3rd month. And I'm freaking out now because my contract's cut. Now I've spent all this money on this Airbnb that I don't need anymore. Luckily, my Airbnb hosts were really cool, and they let me make some of that money back, but I still ended up losing about $600 that month because I had the contract ended early, and I'd already paid for the Airbnb. You know, that is one of the drawbacks to travel. Things can kind of be unpredictable and not as steady. I like that. It's part of the fun and excitement, but you have to be careful with your housing and just make sure that you are ready for anything. And one of the ways that you can do that is not signing a lease longer than a month. And I tell all of the people that I rent for off the bat, hey, I think I'm going to be here for 3 months, but I want to rent month to month because this may happen. And they're normally really cool and totally understand, and I'll give it through halfway through the month to kind of feel out the contract and see what's happening, and then I'll let them know, like, hey, yeah, let's go ahead and extend another month. Another question I get is, how long are the travel contracts? And to that I will say, it depends. Most travel contracts, they want you there for at least 13 weeks, which is about 3 months. Some will be longer, around 6 months. All of that depends on why they need the traveler in the first place. Sometimes it's because they're waiting to find somebody to work full time. for pregnancy leave, something like that. So all the situations are different. I myself love the 3-month contracts. They're just long enough to where I can make good money and just short enough not to get burned out and tired of the area. I've also worked contracts that were only 1 month at a time, which is cool. A little short contract, month contract here and there. But I've heard of contracts that can be week long or even like 2 or 3 days. Again, it all just depends. What about health insurance? So again, it's gonna depend by your agency. So I've had really great health insurance in the past. They will cover you throughout the contract and up to 2 weeks after your contract expires, and it'll just keep going if you keep working with them. The company that I'm working for right now, they don't do health insurance, but I make sure that I have health insurance through my state, and there's a lot of different options when it comes to health insurance. Technically not covered for prime care visits or walk-in clinic visits. If I were to get sick or something happened to me here, I'd be paying out of pocket. But if something crazy happened to me, like I needed a surgery or something, it would be covered under the insurance that I have. So really, whatever coverage makes you feel more comfortable. I am a healthy 29-year-old. I'm not on any medications. I don't really ever get sick. Of course, that's why you have insurance, because all those things could happen at any point. But I did have an emergency surgery last year, and I was out of state for that, but my insurance luckily did cover that. So it's just whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, so I said I would go back and talk about permanent tax home and taxes in general. My number one tip for taxes is get a good accountant to do your taxes at the end of the year, because as soon as you start traveling and picking up different W-2s from different states, taxes can get very complicated very fast. Another good thing to talk about is write-offs with your tax guy, because once you start traveling, you may be able to save on taxes if you write different expenses off. If you're not getting a food stipend, you may be able to write off food while you're traveling. You may be able to write off mileage while you're traveling if you're not getting a mileage reimbursement through your company. So even if companies don't offer you these stipends, they can still be an opportunity for you to save on taxes at the end of the year. I'm no tax expert. This is just what I have discovered with my tax guy and the research that I've done in the past. Definitely do research. You don't want to screw up on your taxes, but getting a good accountant to figure all that stuff out with you can really save you at the end of the year and help you to maximize what you make while you travel. So you will want to have a paper trail to a permanent tax home address, just in case the IRS decides to audit you. You have documentation representing that you indeed are paying your fair share of taxes at a permanent property. This will allow you to receive your stipends tax-free. So there's a few different ways that you can do this. Of course, number one is own a house and pay a mortgage, or some people will continue renting a house or an apartment and they'll have that place to come back to in between contracts. I've also known travelers that will split rent with a roommate, continue to do that. And others will draft a document with a landlord stating that they still pay household expenses at a property, and they'll negotiate a monthly or yearly amount to pay the owner or put some of the bills in the property in their name, such as like the water, internet, electric, so that they can claim that property as their permanent tax home address. Now, of course, I do not know the entirety of all of the tax laws, so if you have any questions regarding this sort of thing, the best person to ask would be your accountant, and they'll be able to figure out something with you so that you can make sure that you are doing everything correctly. Another question that you may be asking yourself is, what about licensure? So as registered dietitians, there are different licensing laws in each state. So for me in the past with my contracts, I have just figured out what the process is to become licensed in that state, and the company will reimburse you for whatever cost that was. So Florida, for example, it was a short form and I think $200 to become a licensed registered dietitian in the state of Florida. and that money, the $200, was just reimbursed in my first paycheck. So typically your company will help you out with that sort of thing. Alright guys, well that was the quick and dirty of traveling as a healthcare professional. If you guys have any questions, please leave it in the comments. I may do another video on this because it is something that I'm passionate about. I love traveling. I love not being in the rat race and just having the freedom to work where and when I want. It really just doesn't get any better. And if you are able to travel and you're not tied down, or you can find a way to make it work, I really encourage you to get out there and take advantage of it right now, especially if you're a dietitian, because you can just make so much more money. You can have way better quality of life, and it's just a good way to get different experiences. I've worked in a lot of different settings in hospitals, and if you're kind of searching for your niche or where you prefer working, traveling can really help you to figure that out. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like this video, make sure to like it, and again, comment if you have any questions. Love you guys, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Bye.